The sun hung low over the Oklahoma Territory, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet as the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. The two cowboys, Elias and Caleb Carter, twins known far and wide for their sharpshooting and quiet demeanor, rode their horses at a slow pace, their shadows stretching long across the prairie. They had left the lawless town of Redemption behind, seeking solitude and the promise of open land. But solitude was the last thing they would find. As dusk settled, the brothers made camp near a creek, the sound of trickling water a rare comfort in the arid land. Elias, the elder by 7 minutes, tended to the fire while Caleb checked their supplies. Neither spoke much. Words between them were often unnecessary. They had shared a womb, a childhood, and now a life on the run from the ghosts of their past. Then, the firelight flickered against movement in the brush. Caleb's hand instinctively went to his revolver, but Elias held up a hand, signaling him to wait. The rustling grew louder, and from the darkness emerged a group of women. Cherokee women, their faces painted with streaks of red and black, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. The eldest among them, a woman with silver streaks in her dark braids, stepped forward. She spoke in broken English, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You are the ones they call the Carter twins?" she asked. Elias nodded slowly. "We are." "Who's asking?" The woman's name was Ayanna, and she was the last elder of a tribe that had once thrived in these lands. She told them of a sickness that had swept through their village months ago, taking every man, warriors, hunters, fathers, sons. The women had buried their dead, tended to the children, and prayed to the spirits for guidance. But a tribe without men was a tribe without a future. The Great Spirit had sent them a vision. 2 men, twins, would come to them. They would be the ones to help them survive. Caleb scoffed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Lady, we ain't saints. We're just men trying to stay alive." Ayanna's gaze didn't waver. "You are the ones the spirits chose. We have no one else." Elias studied the women. Young mothers, widows, girls barely old enough to understand the weight of their loss. Their clothes were patched, their faces gaunt, but their eyes burned with a fire that hadn't been snuffed out. He looked at Caleb, and in that silent exchange, they both knew they couldn't turn away. The women led them to the village, hidden deep in a valley where the land was still fertile. The lodges were small but sturdy, built by hands that had known hardship. Children peeked out from behind their mothers, their curiosity tempered by the caution drilled into them. The twins were given a lodge of their own, a space that smelled of cedar and dried herbs. Ayanna explained the terms. They would stay for a month, no more, no less. In that time, they would do what they could to ensure the tribe's survival. That night, as the twins sat by the fire outside their lodge, the weight of what they'd agreed to settled over them. The women had made it clear, this wasn't about desire or love. It was about survival. The tribe needed children, and the twins were their last hope. Caleb broke the silence first. "You think we're doing the right thing?" Elias stared into the flames. "I don't know. But I know we can't walk away." The first woman came to them that night. Her name was Noya, a widow with a quiet strength that filled the lodge. She didn't speak as she entered, but her eyes held a gratitude that needed no words. The twins understood their roles. They were seeds, nothing more. There would be no promises, no bonds beyond what was necessary. As the nights passed, more women came, each with their own stories, their own losses. Some were shy, others bold, but all carried the same desperate hope. The twins took turns, ensuring neither was overwhelmed, though the emotional toll was heavier than either had expected. They listened to the women's stories, learned their names, and tried to offer what little comfort they could. The village began to change. Laughter returned to the children's voices. The women stood taller, their shoulders less burdened. The twins hunted, bringing back deer and rabbits, teaching the older boys how to track and skin game. They mended lodges, sharpened tools, and did what they could to prepare the tribe for the winter ahead. But not everyone was welcoming. A few of the younger women resented the twins' presence, seeing them as a reminder of what they'd lost. One evening, as Elias returned from the creek, a stone struck his shoulder. He turned to see a girl no older than 16, her face twisted in anger. "You're not one of us," she spat. "You'll leave, And then what? We'll be left with more babies and no fathers. Elias didn't argue. He simply nodded and walked away. He understood her anger. He'd felt it himself, anger at the world, at fate, at the cruelty of life. The days blurred together, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. The twins lost track of how many women had come to their lodge, how many stories they'd heard. They were no longer just cowboys. They were keepers of a fragile hope. Then, one morning, Ayanna approached them as they saddled their horses for a hunt. Her expression was grave. "There are men coming," she said. "White men. They've been seen near the edge of our land." Caleb's jaw tightened. How many? Enough to be trouble. The twins exchanged a glance. They knew the type, land-hungry settlers or outlaws looking for easy prey. Either way, the tribe was in danger. "We'll handle it," Elias said. Ayanna's eyes flickered with relief. "The spirits sent you to us for more than one reason." That afternoon, the twins rode out, their rifles loaded, their senses sharp. They found the men, a group of 5, rough-looking and armed, their eyes gleaming with the kind of greed that spelled trouble. The leader, a man with a scar running down his cheek, sneered as he saw the twins approach. "This here's our land now," he said. "Ain't no Injuns got a right to it." Caleb's voice was cold. "You're on Cherokee land. Ride away, and you might live to see tomorrow." The scarred man laughed, but his hand hovered over his pistol. "You boys outnumbered." Elias didn't flinch. "Maybe. But we ain't the ones who'll be buried before sundown." The tension hung thick in the air, the kind that precedes bloodshed. The twins had faced death before, but this wasn't their fight alone. It was for the women, the children, the future they'd been asked to help create. The scarred man's hand twitched toward his gun. Elias drew first. The gunshot echoed through the valley like thunder, and the scarred man crumpled to the ground before his fingers could close around the grip of his revolver. His companions froze, their faces twisting from arrogance to shock in an instant. Caleb's rifle was already trained on the next man, his voice steady as steel. "Next one moves, he dies." The outlaws hesitated, their eyes darting between their fallen leader and the twins' unyielding stares. One of them, a wiry man with a patchy beard, raised his hands slowly. "Ain't no need for more bloodshed, boys. We'll ride on." Elias didn't lower his rifle. "You'll ride fast, and you won't come back. If I see any of you near these lands again, I won't miss." The men didn't argue. They mounted their horses, dragging their leader's body behind them, and disappeared over the ridge. The twins watched until the dust settled, their breaths slow and controlled. They knew this wasn't the end. Men like that didn't forget, but for now, the threat was gone. When they returned to the village, the women gathered around them, their faces a mix of relief and awe. Ayanna stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of gratitude. "You have saved us twice now. Once by staying, and again by fighting." Caleb wiped the sweat from his brow. "We did what needed doing." That night, the village held a feast in their honor. The fire burned high, and the scent of roasted venison and corn cakes filled the air. The children danced, their laughter ringing through the valley, while the women sang songs of thanks and remembrance. The twins sat among them, their presence no longer that of outsiders but of protectors. As the night deepened, Elias found himself sitting beside Noya, the first woman who had come to their lodge. She handed him a wooden bowl filled with stew, her fingers brushing his as she did. "You carry a heavy heart," she said softly. Elias looked into the flames. "We all do." She didn't press him, but her silence was an invitation. He found himself speaking of things he'd never told another soul, the weight of the lives they'd taken, the men they'd buried, the guilt that gnawed at them like a hungry beast. Noya listened, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight, her presence a balm to the wounds he'd carried for so long. Meanwhile, Caleb sat with a group of younger women, their laughter pulling a reluctant smile from him. One of them, a bold girl named Talulai, challenged him to a game of chance, using pebbles and a woven mat. He lost more often than he won, but the joy in her eyes made the defeat worth it. The month was passing faster than either twin had expected. The women's bellies had begun to swell, the first signs of new life stirring within them. The tribe's future was no longer a distant hope but a tangible reality. Yet, with each passing day, the twins felt the weight of their impending departure. They had given their word, they would stay for a month, no more, no less. But leaving now felt like abandoning something they'd helped create. One evening, as the twins sat outside their lodge, Ayanna approached them. Her expression was solemn, her hands clasped tightly before her. "The month is nearly over," she said. "The women have asked me to speak for them. They wish for you to stay." Caleb looked away, his jaw tightening. "We can't. We got our own path to walk." Ayanna nodded, as if she had expected the answer. "Then we ask for one more thing. Teach us to protect ourselves. Teach the women to shoot, to fight, to survive without relying on others." Elias exchanged a glance with Caleb. It was a fair request, one they couldn't refuse. For the next few days, they taught the women how to handle rifles, how to track and move silently through the woods, how to defend themselves if the need arose. The women were quick learners, their determination sharpening their skills faster than the twins had anticipated. On the final night of their stay, the village gathered once more. The fire burned bright, and the air was thick with unspoken emotions. The twins had packed their saddlebags, their horses ready for the journey ahead. Ayanna stood before them, her voice steady but her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You have given us more than life," she said. "You have given us hope. The children born of this month will carry your names, so that they will remember the men who saved their people." Caleb swallowed hard, his throat tight. "We didn't do it for thanks." "We know," Ayanna replied. "That is why it means so much." As the twins mounted their horses, the women lined the path, their hands raised in farewell. Noya stepped forward, pressing a small pouch into Elias's hand. Inside were 2 feathers, bound together with a strip of leather. "For luck," she said. Elias nodded, tucking the pouch into his pocket. With a final glance at the village, they rode out, the firelight fading behind them. The weight of what they'd done settled over them, not as a burden but as a quiet pride. They rode in silence for a long time, the only sound the rhythmic clop of their horses' hooves. Finally, Caleb broke the quiet. "You think we'll ever see them again?" Elias looked at the horizon, where the first light of dawn was beginning to break. "I don't know. But I know we did the right thing." Caleb nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, we did." The twins rode on, their shadows stretching long before them, their hearts lighter than they'd been in years. Behind them, the village continued to thrive, the echoes of their time there woven into the fabric of the tribe's future. And though they would never speak of it to others, the memory of those nights, those women, and that tribe would stay with them forever, a reminder that sometimes, even in the wildest of worlds, hope could be found in the most unexpected places. The twins rode for days, the vastness of the Oklahoma Territory swallowing their tracks as they pushed westward. The land changed around them, rolling hills gave way to jagged mesas, and the air grew drier, carrying the scent of dust and distant storms. Neither man spoke much, each lost in his own thoughts, the weight of what they'd left behind lingering like a ghost between them. On the 3rd night, they made camp near a dry creek bed, the stars above them sharp and endless. Elias sat with his back against a rock, the pouch Noya had given him clutched in his hand. He pulled out the feathers, running his fingers along their edges. They were soft, almost weightless, but they carried the weight of a promise. Caleb watched him from across the fire, his expression unreadable. "You thinkin' about goin' back?" Elias didn't look up. "No. But I'm thinkin' about what we left." Caleb tossed a stick into the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. "We did what we could. Ain't no shame in that." "I know." Elias tucked the feathers back into the pouch and slipped it into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. "Just feels like we left something unfinished." Caleb sighed, leaning back against his saddle. "Life don't always tie up neat, brother. Sometimes you just got to walk away and trust you did enough." Elias knew he was right, but the restlessness in his chest wouldn't ease. He thought of the women's faces, the children's laughter, the way the village had begun to heal. He thought of Noya's quiet strength, the way she had listened to his stories without judgment, the way her hand had felt in his. He thought of the future, children with dark eyes and wild hearts, growing up in a world that had tried to break their people but failed. The next morning, they rode into a small town, little more than a cluster of wooden buildings and a saloon with a crooked sign. The place was quiet, the kind of quiet that meant trouble was either coming or had already passed through. They watered their horses at the trough and stepped into the saloon, the scent of whiskey and stale smoke thick in the air. The bartender, a grizzled man with a scarred lip, eyed them as they approached. "You boys look like you've seen better days." "Haven't we all?" Caleb muttered, sliding onto a stool. Elias ordered 2 whiskeys, the burn of the liquor grounding him as he scanned the room. A group of men in the corner fell silent when they saw the twins, their hands drifting toward their guns. Elias ignored them, his focus on the road-worn map tacked to the wall behind the bar. His finger traced a line westward, toward the mountains. "We headin' to California?" Caleb asked, following his gaze. Elias shook his head. "Nah, north. Wyoming." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Why Wyoming?" "Heard tell of a place up there," Elias said, his voice low. "Land's still free if you're willin' to work for it. No law, no trouble. Just open sky." Caleb studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Sounds like a plan." They finished their drinks and left the saloon, the tension in the room easing as they stepped back into the sunlight. The twins had always moved like shadows, never staying in one place for too long. But for the first time, Elias felt the pull of something more, a desire to put down roots, to build something that lasted. They rode north, the days blending into weeks. The land grew wilder, the towns fewer and far between. They hunted when they could, slept under the stars, and spoke little. But the silence between them was different now, filled with unspoken understanding. One evening, as they sat by their fire, Caleb broke the quiet. "You ever think about what it'd be like to stop runnin'?" Elias poked at the fire with a stick. "All the time." "Then why don't we?" Elias looked at him, surprised. "You serious?" Caleb shrugged. "Why not? We ain't gettin' any younger. And after what we saw back in that village, maybe it's time we built something of our own." Elias considered it. The idea of staying in one place, of waking up to the same horizon every morning, was foreign to him. But so was the idea of walking away from something that mattered. "You think we could?" Caleb grinned, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Hell, brother. We're the Carter twins. Ain't nothin' we can't do if we set our minds to it." Elias chuckled, shaking his head. "Reckon you're right." They rode on, their path shifting slightly, as if drawn by an unseen hand. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks dusted with snow even in the warmth of early autumn. The air was thinner here, crisper, and the land stretched out before them like a blank canvas. One afternoon, they crested a ridge and looked down into a valley so green and fertile it took their breath away. A river cut through the center, its waters clear and fast, and the trees stood tall and proud, their leaves rustling in the wind. It was the kind of place that made a man believe in second chances. Elias reined in his horse, his heart pounding. "This is it." Caleb didn't argue. He just nodded, his gaze sweeping over the land with something like wonder. "Yeah, this'll do." They set up camp in the valley, their fire small but bright against the gathering dusk. For the first time in years, Elias felt something akin to peace. This was their land now, their future. And though they would never forget the women who had changed them, this was where they would begin again. Over the next few months, they built a cabin, their hands rough and calloused from the labor. They hunted, fished, and planted crops, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the seasons rather than the whims of fate. The twins had always been survivors, but here they became something more. They became creators, stewards of the land, men with a purpose beyond the next horizon. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their finished cabin, a rider approached. Elias tensed, his hand going to his rifle, but Caleb laid a hand on his arm. "Easy, brother. Ain't no threat here." The rider was a young Cherokee man, his face familiar though Elias couldn't place it. He dismounted, his eyes sweeping over the cabin and the fields beyond. "You're the Carter twins," he said, his voice steady. Elias stood, his heart suddenly in his throat. "We are. Who's a skin?" The man reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a bundle wrapped in deerskin. He handed it to Elias, his expression solemn. "My name is Chayton. My mother was Noya." Elias took the bundle, his hands trembling slightly as he unwrapped it. Inside was a blanket, woven with intricate patterns and dyed in rich, earthy tones. At the center was a design he recognized, the twin feathers, stitched in red and black thread. "She wanted you to have this," Chayton said. "A thank you. And a reminder." Elias looked up, his throat tight. "How is she?" Chayton smiled. "Strong. The tribe is thriving. The children are healthy." He gestured to the valley. "You've built a good life here." Elias nodded, clutching the blanket to his chest. "We tried." Chayton stayed the night, telling them stories of the village, of the women who had become warriors in their own right, of the children who carried the twins' names with pride. When he left the next morning, he took with him an invitation, one the twins knew they would one day accept. As they watched him ride away, Caleb clapped Elias on the shoulder. "Guess we ain't as forgotten as we thought." Elias smiled, the blanket warm in his hands. "Guess not." The twins stood on the porch, watching the sun dip below the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. The land was quiet, the air filled with the scent of pine and earth. For the first time in their lives, they weren't just survivors. They were home. And though the road had been long and the burdens heavy, they knew they had done the right thing. For the women, for the tribe, and for themselves. The fire crackled beside them, the stars blinked overhead, and the valley stretched out before them, full of promise. The twins had ridden far and seen much, but this was where their story would continue. And for the first time, they were ready to write the next chapter.